Alrighty then. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. This is another exciting episode of The Metallist, and of course, what would be better on St. Patrick's Day than, of course, ranking the albums of the mighty THIN LIZZY, Ireland's finest. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we got 12 studio albums here, and we're going to rank from least favorite to, of course, favorite. Let's go ahead and get started. Coming in at number 12. We've got Shades of a Blue Orphanage. This is the second album from THIN LIZZY from 1972. I'll be honest, I got nothing. I haven't listened to this album in years. Not much on the Eric Bell era of the band. As you can see, this is the version of the three-piece, and that's Eric over there on the right. Yeah, can't really remember much about this record other than the fact that obviously didn't catch my attention enough to play it, so that's why it's at the bottom of the list. Okay, coming in at number 11 is the debut album from 1971. Again, not a huge fan of the Eric Bell period, but a lot of people are. Just never caught my fancy. But the only thing I remember from this album is Look What the Wind Blew In. That was kind of a cool song, and I just remember it was a good record, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. All right, so then coming in at number 10, not surprisingly, is Vagabonds of the Western World. This is the third and final album to feature Eric Bell from 1973. So this one had the rocker on it. That's a big-time favorite. Like I said, then, of course, the title track, Little Girl in Bloom, and depending on what version you had of this, you may have had Whiskey in the Jar on this record. Whiskey was actually a standalone single, I believe, so probably the original version of this album did not have that particular track on it, but I think a lot of the CD reissues do. So, and of course, this was their first big hit at that point. All right, so let's continue on. So Eric decided to leave the band, and legend has it that Phil decided that he did not want to ever be without a guitarist again, so he ended up hiring two guitar players. So we see the picture here. We've got the young man on the left. That is Brian Robertson, or Robbo, as he became known later on. Robbo was still a teenager at this point, and then all the way from the USA, as Phil liked to say, he hired the mighty Scott Gorham, and Scott would turn out to be the longest-running guitarist ever in THIN LIZZY. He was there from 1974 till the demise of the band. And incidentally, St. Patrick's Day is Scott Gorham's birthday, so happy birthday to Scott, and just how appropriate, right? Okay, so this is their first album together in 1974. This is Nightlife. Okay, and as you see, they were kind of getting better as things went on at this point. So yeah, this is the first album with what most people would consider to be the classic lineup of THIN LIZZY, being Robertson, Gorham, and of course Brian Downey and Phil Lynott. Okay. So in this particular album, we had She Knows is kind of a nice mellow tune that opens the album. It's Only Money, which is a great song. Still in Love with You and Showdown. So yeah, some good stuff. Definitely a major leap forward here as far as what the band was doing. All right, so coming in at number 8, Chinatown. Title track is amazing. A little bit of a shift here in the band. The fellow there with the tie next to Scott Gorham, this is Snowy White. And interestingly enough, Snowy White, before joining THIN LIZZY, was a sideman for Pink Floyd and actually toured with Pink Floyd during the tour for The Wall. So he was one of the extra guitar players. All right, so we move on from 1980 to 1981. So here we have Renegade coming in at number 7. Again, the same lineup of the band in this case. Another great title track, kind of a mellow, a little bit brooding song, but then it'll have some heavy parts to it. But yeah, Renegade is just an amazing song, so good. The album starts off with kind of an unusual track. A lot of keyboards to it, but a very heavy, very dark song called Angel of Death. which has a lot to do with Notre Dame and that kind of thing. So very cool track. I mean, it used to actually get some airplay back in the day on Cleveland radio. And that was how I was familiar that the album had come out. Of course, I had to go out and get one. So yeah, that song is very interesting. The Pressure Will Blow is great. Hollywood. Some people know it by When You're Down on Your Luck, but that's a great song. One of my definite favorites. All right, so we'll move back to 1975. So back to the classic lineup again. And this is the album Fighting, coming in at number 6. So Fighting had some different covers. I think this was the European cover that's being shown here. I think they had a different cover in America. But again, some really good songs in here. So we have Rosalie, which technically isn't their song, but neither was Whiskey in the Jar. Rosalie was actually a Bob Seger song. And in the early 70s, Thin Lizzy did a lot of touring with Bob Seger, and they liked this particular Bob Seger song, and quite frankly, did a much better job. Matter of fact, it wasn't until just a few years back I heard the Seger version. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I was way used to the Thin Lizzy version, but yeah, I think the Thin Lizzy version's a lot better. So we've got that tune, then we've got Suicides on here, one of the concert favorites, and we've got Wild One, and Freedom Song, which is a very cool deep cut that if you haven't heard, please go check that one out. I think you'll really like that one a lot. All right, coming in at number 5, we're going to raise a few eyebrows here. Jailbreak. Most people are like, really? This isn't number 1? Well, not for me anyway. But interestingly enough, I mean, I was watching a documentary on Thin Lizzy here not too long ago, and people close to the band, they said to him, well, the boys are back in town. Is that like the best Thin Lizzy song ever? Like, oh no, not even close. And it's a great song, don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously massively overplayed, and to a lesser extent, the title track, Jailbreak. That's about the only 2 songs that get played in America. And then some other classics on this particular album. We've got, of course, the Cowboys song, which was always a big concert favorite, and a big favorite of mine, too. And appropriately for today, the song Emerald. So really good stuff there. But again, like I said, I mean, great album, but they definitely had stuff that was even better. And during the same year, 1976, they also released this album. So they were really on fire at this point. So they released Johnny the Fox, which I could probably like this one better than Jailbreak simply because it hasn't had the amount of play that Jailbreak did. You know, I mean, Jailbreak, kind of got played to death in some respects. So, but Johnny the Fox, good stuff there. Don't Believe a Word is on here. Fool's Gold. And, of course, Johnny the Fox meets Jimmy the Weed. That's kind of a cool song. A little bit of a story going on there. And then the song Massacre. And Thin Lizzy was a big influence on Iron Maiden. And they'll be the first to admit that. As a matter of fact, they did Massacre as a B-side. And you can see where the Lizzy influence definitely affected Maiden. So, again, really great record there. All right, coming in at number 3. 1979, Black Rose album. Now, interestingly enough, we see here between Phil and Brian Downey, we see Gary Moore. Gary Moore is often equated with Thin Lizzy, but this is really the only album he ever appeared on. He did play with them back in the early 70s, I think 73, 74, somewhere in there, but never recorded a record with them. And, of course, Phil had worked with Gary Moore in the band Skid Row, not the Skid Row with Sebastian Bach, but a different Skid Row. And the members of Skid Row didn't think he was a good enough vocalist, and they sent him on his way. Okay. Also intriguing is, I don't know if it was around this time, I think it was a little earlier, Ritchie Blackmore and Ian Pace from Deep Purple were talking about forming a band with Phil Lynott, doing like a power trio thing. And they didn't think Phil's bass playing was good enough, which surprises me because I think he's a really cool bass player. I mean, maybe he got better. I don't know. But I would certainly rate him as a better bass player than Roger Glover. But what do I know? So just a little interesting background there. But let's get back to Black Rose. So Black Rose, again, great record. The title track is, 7-8 minutes long, very Irishy, very folky, and lots of different parts to it. Almost progressive in a way. But yeah, awesome song. Really, really good. Do Anything You Want to Do is on there. Excellent song. Waiting for an Alibi, one of my all-time favorites. So yeah, I mean, some great stuff. The nice ballad for Phil's daughter called Sarah. Got to Give It Up. Unfortunately, Phil never did give it up. and then we lost him in 1986, I believe, January of '86. So, but he definitely understood that he had some issues and never quite got them tackled, unfortunately. So at number 3, we got Black Rose. Number 2, from 1983, Thunder and Lightning. Okay. This, and I've said this in probably other videos and whatnot, this to me is the greatest finale album ever released. Because most of the time, by the time a band gets to the end of their career, stuff they're putting out isn't that great. This album is just amazing. And I remember buying this album, and I'm like, what do you mean they're breaking up? I don't even understand why they would want to do that. But there you have it. So again, a little bit of a lineup change. We have the guy with the long blonde hair in between Brian and Phil. That is the legendary John Sykes. John, prior to this, was in a new wave of British heavy metal band called Tigers of Pantang, which was a really excellent band. Really enjoyed them a lot. Then he joined Thin Lizzy, and after that, he teamed up with David Coverdale and wrote some of the more popular Whitesnake albums, including Slide It In, and then a few years later, the infamous self-titled 1987 album with all the big hits that made Whitesnake superstars in the United States. And then we've got Scott Gorham still here with kind of a short haircut. Doesn't really look like him. And the young man on the right, or no, yeah, on the right there, is Darren Morton, who came in and played keyboards. I think he actually started playing keyboards on Renegade, maybe. And he worked with Phil for quite a few years towards the end there. But I think this is the only album where he was sort of kind of put in as an official member. And after that, he formed his own band called Dare, which has had quite a bit of success in Europe. Nothing here in the States, but he was a very young guy at the time, too. I think he was maybe 20-ish at this point. But so Thunder and Lightning, the title track, very aggressive, very fast. I believe Phil said that this was kind of his tribute to Motorhead in a way. And if you listen to the track, you can definitely see that. Then we have The Sun Goes Down, a nice kind of ballady song, very, very good. Holy Wars, great groove from Phil on that one, lots of great guitar work. I mean, this is an amazing record. If you have not heard this record, you really need to get it. Okay. Cold Sweat is a good rocker and kind of a precursor to what John Sykes would later do with Whitesnake, just as far as guitar tone and solos and that kind of thing. And then another great track on there is Baby Please Don't Go. So coming in at number 2. So the number 1 album for me. Kind of a time of turmoil, but some really good music here. So coming in at number 1 from 1977, we got Bad Reputation. And notice we only have 3 guys on the cover. Originally, Brian Robertson worked on this album. But there was just some issues with the band. They weren't getting along, and finally Brian had to be sent on his way. So I don't even know if they kept any of his contributions on this record. So at this point, they were kind of a 3-piece once again, at least for a little bit. But the stuff on this album is amazing. It's like so good. And this is an album I always play start to finish. Some of the other albums I might pick and choose a couple tracks, skip through on the CD, but this one we just put it on and play. So we start off with Soldier of Fortune, which is an amazing song. Then we've got the title track, of course, Bad Reputation. Opium Trail is a really good song. Nice cover of Opium Trail by John Norum, who was the guitarist for Europe, but obviously is a huge Thin Lizzy fan, because if you look at John's solo records, practically every one of them has a Thin Lizzy song on there as a cover. And he probably has enough Thin Lizzy songs that he could do a cover album of strictly Thin Lizzy. So Norum, huge fan of that. And Opium Trail is one of the songs that he happened to do. I think that was on his Face the Truth album. Check that album out too, Face the Truth by John Norum. The majority of the vocals are done by the mighty Glenn Hughes. So a very cool record. If you haven't heard it, check that one out. So then we've got, like I say, Opium Trail. We've got Southbound, Dancing in the Moonlight, which gets a little bit of play. And I've always said that I really wish that Van Morrison would cover that song. I think it would just be really good. Then we have Killer Without a Cause. The album ends with Dear Lord, which is a very cool song. So yeah, just can't say enough about this particular record. So there we go. That's my rating for the Thin Lizzy albums. Again, I appreciate you guys watching. If Be sure to like and subscribe, and of course comment. That's one of my favorite things for you guys to do. And we will see you next time.